All right. So last week at the higher ed call, we had this guest speaker, Larry Lindenschmidt, who came in and spoke about evangelical outreach. I know for many of you that may not be super top of mind in your specific context, but for if any of you like did hear bits and pieces of that that you felt were valuable, I'd love for anybody to just share what they took away from that conversation that they think you might be able to apply to your own work on campus or in your community, or maybe even in your family if you have someone in your family who identifies that way and that you struggle to talk about climate with.
I thought a really interesting part of it was how much he discussed like the humanness of it. And so talking about like his own personal experiences with it of like natural disasters in specific areas. And so really touching back on one thing that I've encountered a lot with CCL that I really, really appreciate is just even though this is a national organization, like it is very community based. And a big, one of CCL's like big pillars of their values is relationships. And so when somebody might be a climate denier, whether or not they accept that it may be because of climate change, they've likely experienced some kind of climate related disaster. And so just asking them about their experience, maybe just their connection with nature in general, and trying to find some kind of a way that you could talk about something else. So maybe if they're not into something like a carbon fee and dividend, you can talk about one of the smaller goals that CCL has, like planting more trees and reforestation, and just finding those like little personal ways to connect with people.
I think that that observation is great, Sadie. I think that's going to be a really big part of our work around elections this year too, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, I think just connecting as human beings, that's always CCL's approach, and it clearly resonates a lot with the evangelicals that Larry works with. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Yeah, Philip.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on this whole discussion of talking with evangelicals, because I think for a lot of people who are in the climate movement, there's on a day-to-day basis, they're not going to be even interacting with like there's not going to be very much overlap with between evangelicals and the demographic of people who become climate advocates. So I think that there's a lot more to this conversation than like when we say what does it mean to like connect with people on a human level? Like we need to do it in a way ideally where we're not like trying to do it just for like a a sneaky purpose to try to get them involved in climate action. So I feel like it's a lot harder. I mean, it's the only way to do it seems to be to really get people who you can have a deep connection with. But it seems challenging to be in a situation where you can develop those connections in a deep way authentically.
Yeah, Stanley. John will have to raise your hands too. Like you're the only one with your hand raised. You could just unmute.
Um, yeah, I took a medieval philosophy class in college, which I thought would be like about like valor and like what do you call like the coat of arms and stuff like that. And then it turned out to be just like Thomas Aquinas and Christian philosophy, which was really strange as like a side note because like it's weird like arguing whether angels are a species like one species or like different species for every angel when like you don't believe in angels. Um but I think like one of the themes in there was like competing views in religion on whether like God gave you the earth, so you have to like watch over it wisely, which is kind of like what Larry Lindschmidt talked about. And the other view was that God gave you the earth, so you have dominion over it and you can do with it whatever you want. And I think like that's like the view that we kind of need to address. And I don't think that like Larry addressed it very much. Wait, what's in the chat?
The chat on these calls is always dangerous. Pay no attention to what's happening in the chat.
But yeah, so I think that was like a problem. And then kind of like it's like there's like a tie in there with like the ecofeminist perspective, which I kind of feel like I don't really feel like I'm qualified to talk to, or unless people would give me like the thumbs up, like would that be okay? Okay, so basically the tie-in, right, is like um so like according to the Bible, right, God gave the earth to man to rule over, and then God also gave man like women to rule over. And then so historically, like God giving these to man was like used as justification for him to kind of just be a dick with both. Um, yeah.
I mean that totally makes sense. I'm not a philosopher, but I that argument seems to logic enough for me. And certainly tracks with lived experience. But there are very different like schools of thought on that. And I think the especially with the Bible, like the point that you raised about like the creation care versus dominion is a really still a big point of biblical contention. So it was interesting to hear that in Larry's perspective, at least evangelicals were actually starting from a point of creation care, which I think kind of provides some more opportunity um for like seeing eye to eye and finding some common ground than if you were speaking to somebody who was just fully in on the dominion interpretation.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to be here last week for this talk, so I obviously can't speak on that. And I haven't gained any formal training in talking with religious communities, but we've done through our university chapter, we've done some different presentations with churches and some different luncheons. And we had a church in town that was doing like a youth and climate kind of like few months of advocacy, and we talked with them. And at least so far in what I've experienced, at least as a student in this sphere, is it's never come down to, intense analysis of the Bible. I've never had anyone like throw any Bible verses or anything at me, but it does seem to be a unique community to engage with because it typically, at least once again, just in my experience, has been a bit older community that's really excited to engage with students. And that's really where we've hit our most success with these communities is just being able to be students in this sphere that they're not seeing as many students. And we've got on some like funky topics. There's this weird pattern where they really just once again, the communities here are really into nuclear energy. Like we talk a lot about nuclear energy. For some reason, we are always prepping specifically nuclear energy for any church we've presented to. That's like always the hot topic. So I think there is just like a level of just like knowing your community and like recognizing what they might do. Because I think in some of these formal trainings, it's not what I've really experienced out doing the work. And more just kind of being flexible to like listening to your community members and seeing what they're interested in and what they're hoping to gain from contact with students.
Really great observation, Elizabeth. Thanks for sharing that. I would never have guessed that nuclear would be like the way to reach that community, but I definitely have experienced the youth piece. Like if you're, I was raised Catholic, and frankly, if you were under the age of 40, they were just thrilled you were still at church. So I do think there's a lot of enthusiasm for having young people who actually like want to engage in those conversations and want to talk to them. Great. So one of the big things that happened over the weekend, hopefully everybody got to watch the national call. By show of hands, how many of you made it on to either watch the call live or watch the recording after? Okay. So we are gonna catch folks up to speed then. That's good because then this isn't gonna feel like we're duplicating stuff. So one of the big things that happened on the call was Flannery Winchester, who's our communications director, shared a policy roadmap that the marketing team and legislative team have been hard at work on for the last couple of months, putting together to sort of summarize what we'll be focusing on at different times of the year, what will be strategic at different times of the year based on the types of legislation that are typically up for reintroduction in different phases and where the energy seems to be in Congress. So I thought it would be useful to kind of watch that as a group. And as you're watching it, just like be reflecting on what parts of this roadmap excite you. What do you think would excite like your chapter members or just your general community members on campus, and how you might adapt some of these things, and what are some things that you also feel like that's not really going to land well, like with students, like I can't see them getting excited about it, so we'll probably pass on that and shift gears. And I'm not entirely sure exactly that I've started the video in exactly the right point, so we'll just see what happens, and hopefully you can hear it when I press play.
First up, you see this road sign early in the year here says push for permitting reform. So we start 2024 here from a policy perspective because we engaged heavily on clean energy permitting reform with emails, calls, and lobby meetings right up through the end of last year. Some permitting reforms passed in the summer of 2023, and then further opportunities emerged with the introduction of the Big Wires Act, which deals with energy transmission. So we lobbied on that bill in November. Now, going into this year, the Big Wires Act is unlikely to move as a standalone bill. It's much more likely to pass as part of a larger legislative package. So earlier this week, we kicked off our first big policy action of the year, which was to send a message to your members of Congress, asking them to continue working in a bipartisan way for a package of clean energy permitting reform legislation. So that's one of our January actions in the action sheet, and Brett will touch on that more a little bit later. Our next road sign here says advance the CBAM conversation. CBAM stands for Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which is essentially a type of carbon pricing that uses trade policy to drive down global emissions. So the CBAM conversation really leapt forward last year. The Prove It Act was introduced last summer. That would require the US to start to measure the carbon intensity of certain goods compared to other countries. And then we saw 2 Senate Republicans put forward the Foreign Pollution Fee Act. Democrats in the House and Senate reintroduced the Clean Competition Act. Europe entered the reporting phase of its own CBAM policy, so CBAM's all over. We will continue this year to educate ourselves about this type of carbon pricing and advance the conversation to build more support in Congress. So we've already started this. Our research team just gave a fresh training on bills that have carbon border adjustments or tariffs. That was on January 4th. And just this week, actually, news broke that the Prove It Act is about to be marked up by the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. So we've sent an action opportunity to folks with senators on that committee to help move that bill forward. So we'll continue to offer more opportunities for education and engagement on CBAMs throughout the year. And then in blue here on the map, we come to our first little bridge across the road. This is our Conservative Climate Conference and Lobby Day. So on March 19th and 20th, right of center CCLers will gather in Washington, D.C. to connect with each other and to meet specifically with Republican members of Congress about climate policy. The application's open today for this event. So if you're one of our conservative volunteers and you want to join us in DC, please submit your application. And we'll put a link for where to apply in the chat right now. So that event is coming up in March. And then as we continue down the road throughout the year, the next sign here says elevate climate during primary elections. So as I mentioned before, 2024 is an election year. It's important that we encourage 2024 congressional candidates from any party to have stronger, more committed stances on climate action. And so for most districts, the primary elections are going to be your best chance to elevate climate-friendly candidates from either party. Primary season is going to be your first opportunity to do things like asking climate questions at candidate events and town halls, or to start publishing local media encouraging the candidates to engage on climate issues. And heads up that this work is already beginning. So we have an election engagement action team, which is already prepping for phone banks, postcarding, and more mobilization around the primaries. So if this is an area of interest for you and your chapter, go ahead and jump in with the election engagement action team. And below that road sign, you can see a billboard for regional and state conferences. So throughout the year, CCL regions may organize their own regional or state conferences and lobby days to further grow their local grassroots. The first one of these is actually the Northeast Regional Conference happening the weekend of March 22nd, and registration is open for that now. The conference page of CCL's website is always updated with the next upcoming events, so you can keep an eye out there for your regional event information. So then as we continue through our road signs, the next one says, build support for carbon fee and dividend. So the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act was reintroduced in the House in 2023. That's our favorite carbon pricing bill, of course. And to advance this legislation and the idea of carbon fee and dividend generally, we need to demonstrate even more support in our communities. So you can keep talking about this policy at tabling events, and you can gather Energy Innovation Act constituent letters. And then sometime this spring, when your representative is home from DC, you can plan a drop off of those letters to your representative's district office. And then as we come to the next curve in the road here, a whole chunk of the map represents Farm Bill negotiations. So the Farm Bill is a big, diverse package of legislation that comes up for renegotiation and renewal every 5 years. So it should have expired in 2023. But near the end of the year, Congress passed an extension through September 2024. So we're planning to engage throughout the year and make sure that relevant climate policy is included in that package. So things like the Increased TSP Access Act, which has been a secondary ask in the past, and healthy forest policies. And we'll also be looking to defend already allocated climate smart agriculture and forestry funding in the Farm Bill. So that will be an ongoing effort in 2024. And then, of course, our summer conference and lobby day. So that will be June 8th through 11th. And this is CCL's biggest annual show of grassroots force. So volunteers come to Washington, D.C. from every state in the nation to learn together and then hold hundreds of in-person citizen lobby meetings on Capitol Hill. The specific meeting focus for those lobby meetings will be determined closer to the date, but we do know for sure that we will be in DC this summer, ready to make things happen.
So I'm gonna pause it there because the whole segment is like 10 to 12 minutes, which seems like a really long time to watch a video on a Zoom call. And also, I think for many of us, we think of our lives in semester chunks. So we might as well look at what's happening from here to June and just focus on that. And this video, I'll put the link. The link is in the agenda, but I'll also put it in the chat here also for anybody who wants to just open that up and go back to it in their browser after the call. So yeah, what was standing out to you as you were listening to Flannery break all that down? What sounds exciting, and you know, what can we do to tap into the momentum that CCL as a whole is going to be building around these different pushes throughout the year? Yeah, Philip.
For me, the first two things are probably the most exciting. The CBAM and the permitting reform, just because I feel like there is a lot of hope that we could get those things passed before the end of this Congress. So those things really motivate me. I think it's also exciting for us to keep working on educating people about important things like carbon pricing, which is always kind of exciting, but it's good to have something for the future and something hopefully for now.
Yeah, I agree that the tangible, that Prove It Act really has a good chance of getting through is really exciting. And then personally, I'm excited to work more on Farm Bill and healthy forests. I study basically cell biology and ecology. And so I have a focus on agriculture. And we just made some really good contacts with like a national like sustainable agriculture program. So we're going to do some events and like collaborations with them. And I think that could really rally up some students to work on stuff for Farm Bill. So I think that's gonna be kind of a unique spot for Michigan to have some power.
Yeah, Laura.
I think that, well, if I remember correctly, Flannery was talking about an opportunity for volunteers to go ask climate question for town hall, for Congress people when they come back from DC, and then more opportunities to publish or to express on local media. Because I think that, for me living in like a smaller, more lesser known area in California, it's pretty important to share this kind of big national news as much as possible with what's it called? With like convenient access, like a Google Doc, and then you can mail it for a local newspaper. Or when she also says letter drop off, I think it's also pretty unique as well to deliver something handmade. It's also pretty human connection wise. I think it's really significant. And I think it's gonna fly well with, if I were to present it, it's gonna fly well because I think that most of my college people, I think they're also really community based. And so hearing that, and then it might be a good thing for them.
We also have some folks who will be presenting at regional conferences. So I know that's something that always comes up, and would love to hear from the two of you, Sadie and Catherine, if you have any thoughts about how we can just help more. There's so many campuses in the Northeast. So how can we help more of them to show up to regional conferences? Scholarships, obviously, to cover the cost of travel, but promoting them better. Just any thoughts that you have now that you're kind of on the inside track of planning your own talks. Like, how would you get your chapter members and others to come see you live?
Yeah, I think so. This is gonna be tricky. Just because, like, logistically speaking, with something like a conference, for us at least, you have like you have a regular budget and then a supplemental budget. We don't even have a regular budget because we're such a new club, but we're hoping to apply for supplemental funding. But in order to apply for that funding, you need to know how many people want to go. But people don't know if they want to go because it could be almost $200 for gas and a hotel and the conference fee, even for the student fee, which is only 25. Whereas if we do get the supplemental funding, it might not be anything. So it's like it's hard to get those numbers for both, like trying to get a budget and trying to get people to come. So I think so far that's been the hardest thing for us, is whether or not people can actually afford to go to the conference. And I think just finding where you can kind of cut costs and make it easier where you can. We're going to try and organize carpooling or train rides with the Vermont chapter. So maybe trying to see if you can connect with your local chapter, see what they're doing. I'm taking a lot of guidance from them and seeing how they normally get there, but most of them are adults with adult money, and we don't have that in our chapter. Yeah, and I can't really speak to Catherine's experience, but I think for us, we're definitely learning as we go. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all works out in the end, and hopefully drafting something up and maybe being able to put that in the campus leaders manual for future conferences. So yeah, I think finance is definitely our biggest hurdle.
That's awesome that you're working on that, Sadie. I think it's not going super well for us because it's like at the end of Bowdoin's like March break, so people are gonna be all over the country. So I'm not really sure if there's gonna be a way to get anybody else there.
That's unfortunate timing. We do also have the June conference to look forward to, which has many of the same challenges, but maybe that can also be, I think, sort of the alternative, right? If people are like, I don't really want to spend money to just like go to a couple towns over, but like DC sounds like something I might want to drop some cash on. But we have that same challenge with volunteers in general, not only students, like just having to pick between going to a regional conference or going to DC. And some people like are really faithful regional conference people and only go to that, and some people are really into the DC trip and they'll save up their pennies all year to make it happen every year.
Our plan for the DC conference, just because it's in June and that's probably a good month after we get out, most of the people in our club live like all across the country, is we're going to be talking about it during the last couple months of school. And then before everybody goes home, making absolutely sure that everybody has switched out of our campus CCL chapter into their regional chapter. And then if they don't have one, just connecting them with their closest one and ensuring that they have access to resources of a different group that can get them there, because it would just not feasibly work for us to try and meet up as a campus. But hopefully everybody's seeing each other when we get there. So that's our plan for the DC conference.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I think I'm also going to try to get people connected with their local chapters because, like, when I asked them beginning of the year, there was a lot of interest in like the June conference, especially because the lobby day too. So I don't know if it's worth like doing all that twice for the regional conference too. But yeah.
Are there ways that you see like these different policy focus areas throughout the year, like needing to be specifically adapted to like how you might take action on campus? I know some of these topics, as exciting as they might be for us, don't necessarily like mean anything to the average college student. Which of course that's what we're here for, like to make it meaningful to them. But I'm just curious how we might help to connect those dots for somebody who's never thought about permitting reform before, for example, or CBAMs.
I don't mean to sound like a broken record, keep popping in here, but for us, I think our goal at the beginning of the year, and again, speaking, we're a new club, so we have like brand new members. We have like a good solid base of like 20 people that have, popped in and out. But we're just trying to focus on like one, maybe two policies at a time, just so that it's not an information overload, especially for college students who are constantly going to classes and learning new things. It can just be a lot to take in a lot of policies. So we've selected like one main piece of legislation, and for us, it's the Energy Innovation Act. And just getting people like really excited and connected with this one policy and feeling really confident about it. And then hopefully as our club moves forward and we get a more solid leadership base and a more solid membership base, then we might be able to add more, sort of like how CCL started, just focusing on that one thing. And then as it got bigger, that's when we started adding more. So right now we're just picking one and doing it really well.
Yeah, Emily.
I think at William and Mary next semester, we didn't have as much CFD grassroots outreach last semester as the first semester, but it was kind of interesting to see this difference because the first semester the CFD movement started, we had this through line when the CFD movement started where we were all kind of engaging in that. And like every meeting we would like come together and talk about how things were going. And it was really beautiful community coming out of that. And then this past semester, we kind of did a lot of education about all these different policies. It was like new policy and then new policy and then new policy. And I think it was like we did actions for the policies, but because there was less of a through line and it was more just like education on each one. Like we had to do the upkeep with the education. There was less of, I personally felt less of a community feel than that first semester when we were working really hard together on that one thing. So I think William and Mary is going to keep some focus on the CFD, which is exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot about experimenting with what's going to work and what's going to bring people together. So I do want to be super mindful of time, and I wanted us to have like actual brainstorming time that was a little bit less structured. And also, I know Emily has updates for us, so I'm going to move us past this part of the conversation. But of course, like if you have ideas and want to drop them in the chat or just want to like raise your hand and share them, we can come back to that policy roadmap. But I'll just pass it over to Emily to update us on CFD stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, not too many updates, but just wait, let me see where I wrote all of them.
I think you added them to item number 4 on the agenda.
Oh, yeah. So Stephanie, did you want to talk about A and B?
Yeah, A honestly was just a holdover from last time. So just a reminder that y'all have the toolkit. I don't really have much to say on that, but I did say at the call last week, and I've included this in the emails, we do have funding for stickers and gift cards if you're participating in the CFD movement. Even if you're just getting started now, this might be the best time to start because you get stuff for free and don't have to put your own money down. So you can just fill out that form and apply. And we're doing this on kind of a merit-based sort of setup. So the more information you can give in the little text box where it asks about like what you're going to use the money for, and the stickers, the better your chances are of getting one of those gift cards. But the stickers are pretty much guaranteed until I run out because I have 1,000 of them and I don't plan to live with a box of CFD stickers on my desk for the rest of the year. So please ask me for them. I'd love to send them to you.
That is awesome. Oh my gosh, Stephanie, you're ending up with all these supplies, the littlest climate book and the stickers everywhere.
I just have a like rapidly piling up a stack of boxes of random stuff. So please take it off my hands.
I think I said I would like order one of those little climate books last time, and totally forgot about it. Could you like send the link in the chat right now?
Okay. We have a couple polls going on in the national strategy chat in the Slack. One is on the sign. Catherine added a poll also about where the link goes to, if it should be to only the representatives or also the senators. So if you are interested in getting involved in strategizing, then highly recommend going in that chat. And we're also going to be having a national strategy meeting on the 22nd, and information on that is in the Slack as well. And it's snowing in places, so it's still a great opportunities to have a snowman protest. And if you do, please send lots of pictures and vertical videos. And if you make TikToks, that's so awesome. And we should do collaborative posts and send those in the social media Slack, and we can work on collaborating, getting them up. And then I wrote making TikToks, because always making TikToks, right? So and then one thing that as the semester starting for a lot of people, Philip, you had mentioned this several times in the past semesters about trying to sync actions. And I wonder if that's something that we want to try to do for those involved in the CFD movement at their schools. And if so, would we want to figure that out right now, or is there another time in the call that would be better for that? At Stephanie, maybe.
I mean, I don't know that you'll like get to a specific date, but if you want to chat about that now, or we could chat about that when we do like the brainstorm, which is like literally the next section.
Oh, perfect. Maybe we can just do that in the brainstorm then.
Okay, cool.
Okay. And those are all the national updates.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah. Last update. Check out the Slack to see Catherine Gage's dad with his awesome CFD stuff.
definitely worth going to check it out. It is so wholesome. Okay. Yeah, so what we wanted to do for the rest of the call was just spend some time brainstorming. Since I don't want to like interrupt the flow of that, I would love to just take our group pick now so we don't forget about it and we can actually just like stay in that conversation and not have to interrupt it. So yeah, awesome. Everybody's back on camera. All right, 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay. All right, so then the brainstorm is going to be pretty unstructured. I just suggested as something to keep in mind, like if you're setting concrete goals, I know for a lot of our campus leaders, you have your action plan template that you can fill out every month or every semester that kind of shows the different actions you want to be taking in a given month. So if that is like a tool that you're using and you set some concrete goals for yourself, then that's great. But if you haven't tried thinking about like the actions you're taking, like every tabling event that you're doing as having a really specific goal or outcome, this could be a good time to really tie those actions to goals so you feel, I don't know, a little bit more directed. I find often like if you're just doing everything all at once, like you feel like you're doing stuff, but at the end it feels less fulfilling because you haven't necessarily achieved a specific goal. So the idea behind the brainstorm is to just try to tie things to goals, but I do want this to be pretty freeform. So if it does end up being like the one goal you want to talk about is a mass mobilization where all of our CFD campuses do a CFD thing on the same exact day, which by the way, I highly co-sign, think that'd be a great idea. We could definitely do some press releases around that. Then like maybe that's the goal. Like maybe you set some targets of how many people you engage, how many campuses you engage, whatever that might be. Before we jump like fully into thinking about that though, I do just want to remind folks that tomorrow night is our first training for our elections campaign. So the election engagement action team that Flannery mentioned on the call is a kind of a separate thing. The youth and higher ed groups are coming up with their own campaign that's going to be less focused on just doing EVP and calling random people and more focused on doing that relational outreach, that you all kind of focus that human to human connection. So hopefully that appeals to y'all. I would love to see you tomorrow night at our launch for that. I'm just gonna get the link for the event updated because it's wrong in the chat. But yeah, other than that, I guess we can open up the brainstorm session with whoever would like to start with your own ideas.
Can I start with something? I want to start with something that Catherine and I were kind of talking about, which was it would be kind of nice if we could set up some way for us to communicate with all the campus leaders about like expected like costs or like the costs that are incurred over the course of a semester. And then also like whether you get funding from your school or like kind of how that works. So that we can like use that to like kind of predict like how much funding we would require to like support the student leaders at each school.
Yeah, I think that we can maybe set up some kind of like spreadsheet. I'm happy to help. Awful at spreadsheets. Maybe if somebody else is better with Excel, but I feel like that could be, either Excel or like a Google sheet. And have like, each row is like everybody's putting down their costs per semester. I think that would be a good idea, definitely for like within our universities and then also like external, maybe like grant applications or something like that as well. I think that's a good idea, Stanley.
I guess one of the main concerns was like I know that like adding on too many responsibilities might make it like kind of tedious to do, and then that typically results in people not doing it. Like, do you think guys think that there's like some way to like make it easy and like kind of like a talk that you want to have as opposed to like something that you feel like you would need to do, like a chore?
Could there be something really easy as we maybe set up a form where if somebody buys something, they just take a screenshot of the receipt and send it into a form, and then maybe someone this would be, I think this would, I don't know, this might, I don't know if this is too complicated, but somebody could just like see the receipt and add it to the spreadsheet so that it's a really simple process for the people submitting information, but then it all ends up in a centralized place.
Yeah, Philip. And hey, Pratch.
Well, I don't know if this idea would lead to like incorrect estimations, but I feel like it would definitely be a lot easier just to ask someone how much did you spend over the year, like at the end of the semester, and then they could estimate. I know that for me that wouldn't have been very difficult going back through things, and I could ask people and see what they did. But I'm not totally sure how accurate that will actually be.
I did that this semester. I just like looked through like my credit card charges and then the charges on my like student account. So yeah, also agree it was very easy. Not sure it was 100% accurate, but I feel like it was pretty good. At least it got all the big stuff.
For folks who aren't doing like CFD stuff, just because I also want to make sure we brainstorm and support each other on other projects. Anna, I know you've got a bunch of stuff lined up for this year. Also, Elizabeth, I know you, Mitch, has their own set of activities. Are there any ideas or goals that you're setting for yourselves that we can kind of collectively just brainstorm around and be accountability partners for?
We have a pretty new e-board coming in right now. A number of them are new, so there's going to be a little bit of like a stall, I think, for just like the first week or two as we kind of get that settled in a little bit more. But I do think we'll be focusing a bit more on farming just because we have some more new connections with that. And just Michigan, that's just like a policy that is more rallied behind in Michigan because there's like farm fields everywhere. And then I still would like to continue working on permitting reform. We have Adam Simon is a professor here who is talking about the difficulties of climate and conservation and all the mining difficulties with renewable energy. So we might be doing some collaborations with that to kind of delve into that problem more. Potentially see if we can get him as a guest speaker. He's spoken for CCL previously, but it would be great to have him join for one of our meetings. And then we're going to do some more collaborations with the Ann Arbor chapter. Last semester, Joseph and I were working with them on some city level electrification work, and I'm guessing that will continue. So we're definitely diversifying a bit more, but U of M's student population that's interested in CCL is very, very diverse in studies. We have history majors and engineers and pre-med. So it kind of works well for our strategy to be pretty diverse because people kind of split off kind of naturally into like the policy that they like the most. So it kind of draws in more people. So I think it'll be a lot of just allowing people to follow the policy that interests them most and then trying to figure out how to manage that and make sure we're being effective on all of those because our numbers will be a bit higher this semester.
Exciting. Anna, yeah.
So on my end in Oklahoma, you're right, we do have several things that we're working on. We're trying to prepare some type of Earth Day campaign. I think that's going to be aimed at releasing a brief dedicated to talking about my university's ties to different fossil fuel companies and how those ties now impact our ability to like get involved in the climate movement and whatnot. And we're also trying to work on different fundraising campaigns to help support students in my organization that want to attend like those conferences like CCL's in, I was about to say January, but it's in June. And LCOI, COI, and eventually COP as we get later into the year. So if any of y'all have good fundraising strategies, please let me know because I'm always looking out for those.
I definitely think there's a lot that we can dig into on fundraising. And would folks want to have that like be a focus of a future like brainstorming session on one of these calls where we can just all kind of throw out our ideas for fundraising, what we've done and what we'd like to try?
Stephanie, I
Yeah.
know in a past call, I think we were talking about maybe doing doing a collaborative document so that maybe everyone's shared knowledge on fundraising could be together. Do you know if there's a document already for that in the shared resources folder?
I don't think there is one, but I definitely think that's a good thing to start. Let me try to get that. If I can get that folder open in the next 30 seconds, I will do it right now.
Awesome sauce.
Yeah, Laura.
So this might be only for reference because fundraising here, I see my high school clubs. So for example, I remember my marine what's that club called again? The Marine Club in my high school. They do fundraising, and I guess this is expand to all of my clubs in high school. They do it through food. So in my school, there are a lot of food stores, such as a boba shop, and then there's also I think a sandwich place near. And what they did is that the students come and they communicate. I guess they communicate through the staff, and then, hey, do you want to collab with us? And so that's how they do their fundraisers. So the customer buys like the product, and then I think some portion of the money goes through the fundraiser. And now I don't know this in this logic could help college campus. I know, well, at least for UCI, there is a food court or like a super center near that has a lot of food stores, and I think that if the students are enough of a frequent customer, they can communicate without breaking a sweat. That's a fundraiser idea I have based on observing my high school clubs.
All right, I just put a link in the chat to a fundraising guide that everybody should be able to contribute to. We are at the top of the hour, so if anybody does need to drop off, you are welcome to do so. I'm gonna keep the line open because I know it sounded like there was some interest in exploring what that like mass mobilization synced up event could be or when to plan it for. So yeah, don't feel like you have to stay on since we are over time, but if you'd like to stay on and brainstorm around that, then certainly you are welcome to. Or any other topics, of course, feel free to bring those up.